What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the very first episode of Comics and Coffee, brought to you by MediaBite, where we discuss, dive in, and explore everything in the world and craft of comics. I'm one of your co-hosts, Alex Batts. Joining me today is my good friend, Evan McGuire. How are you doing, man?
Oof, it's been a morning. I won't get into it, but getting to this point, I'm happy to finally be here.
Yeah, I'm glad you got things sorted out. So I said that this is the very first episode of Comics and Coffee, and that's not entirely true. For anyone that's been following us for a while, we did this exact podcast. I don't even know how long ago it was at this point.
It's been a while, man. A lot of stuff has happened since then.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but life happens and schedules and things, so we had to stop for a while, but. We're now at a point where we can, come back to this, pick it back up. Doing a comics podcast is so fun.
Yeah, it's good to be back, dude, because I love talking comics and putting it out there for people who enjoy comics, and it's just a good time.
Oh, yeah, always. And then, so I'm happy that we're able to do this, get it up on the MediaBite podcast network, and
Definitely.
all that good stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's basically the, structure of this podcast, I mean, it's going to be pretty loosey-goosey, honestly. We'll have some episodes where we're talking about the latest releases in the week, and then we'll have other episodes where we're focusing on just what we've read recently, or sometimes we'll dive more into the craft of things. We'll just jump around with stuff. Episode length is another thing that I think is going to vary just depending on what we're talking about. I know we both have no problem talking about or talking for as long as needed about some things.
Definitely.
But then,
so sit tight.
Yeah, pretty much. But by the same token, I don't want to just keep saying the same thing over and over to get to a certain length. So it'll be
no,
one of those
absolutely.
things.
I think podcasts that tend to just go on to, I don't know, fluff things up, so to speak. That kind of stuff just gets boring. So I don't think that having a set time is anything that's required for a podcast. I think it just needs to be loose and just take it where it goes.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see how it goes as we're talking, and then when it just comes to a natural conclusion, we'll be like, all right, that's it. But yeah, so this week is going to be one of those weeks where we talk about what we've been reading recently, because I know you're not completely caught up on your pool, which I until 2 weeks ago had actually been very bad about myself. I was multiple weeks behind constantly.
Yeah.
There's a lot. There's just so many comics all the time.
Oh, it's a ridiculous amount, and I've been backed up for a while. So just not to get into this, but graduating school and moving and stuff. Just a lot of stuff's been going on, but it's felt so refreshing to be able to dive back into all these books. I am caught up on Spider-Man. I had to catch up on my boy first and foremost.
Of course.
We can talk about this at a later date, but I did start catching up on Batman. So. I'm
yeah,
further along than I remembered being, which is nice. So I don't have as much to catch up on, but it's so daunting. But once you get back into it, it's like you never left.
I'm excited for that conversation.
Oh, me too.
Batman's my boy.
Yeah, that's it.
So we'll both just be talking about something that we've read recently. So I mean, I guess I'll go first. And
Definitely.
I read an epic I finished it last week. But it took me 12 days total. Obviously, I wasn't reading the entire day for 12 days.
Right.
But I finally read Knightfall, Batman Knightfall, where Bane breaks the bat. And I know that's a huge... I felt bad as a Batman fan, and having been a Batman fan for as long as I have been, and not having read Knightfall already.
Yeah.
But have you seen how fucking long those books are, bro?
Dude,
they're huge.
Yeah, when I used to work at my local comic shop, anytime somebody bought that book, I'm like, enjoy the next 12 months of your life.
Dude, yeah, that's the main reason that I hadn't read them before now. That and No Man's Land, which No Man's Land is actually next on my list of huge ass books to read.
Nice.
But yeah, the Knightfall trades, I just always seen them, and they're so thick.
Yeah, they are.
So I was just eventually. I just kind of pushed it to the side. But then a couple months ago, I got them digitally. I read a lot of stuff digitally now, which is kind of crazy to me. That's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah, that's a whole topic in itself.
Yeah, there's a lot to that you can get into there. But anyways, Comixology has crazy deals all the time. And so I picked up all 3 volumes of Knightfall for like $5 each, which is insane.
How can you beat that?
Yeah, dude, they're like 625 pages each. So like it's like 1900 pages of comics for like $15. Like
you can absolutely not go wrong with that.
Yeah, so I did that a couple months ago, and then like 2.5 weeks ago, at this point, I was like sitting and I was like looking through my books on comicsology, like trying to figure out what I was going to read next, and like I just like looked at it for a second and I was like, fuck it, like I guess now is as good a time as any. So I started it, and yeah, dude, it's so crazy. It's crazy good, honestly. The main like writers, at least for the first volume, are like Doug Moench, I'm totally saying that wrong, and then Chuck Dixon and Alan Grant, and then the like main like pencilers that I like are just insane in this one, especially. I like you've got Jim Aparo, Norm Brayfogle, Graham Nolan, Klaus Janson. So
can
like,
I just
really
interrupt really quick because I actually know Jim Aparo's cousin.
What?
Yeah, that's a conversation for a later day. But he used to come to my comic shop, and he would just talk to us about like how he would watch Jim just pencil stuff out and whatever. And like there's a town over from me, there's a stretch of road that he used for inspiration. There was like a little like shack or whatever, and he drew like that road with the Batmobile like zooming by. I forget what issue of Batman it was, but it's so surreal to see things that like I know in a Batman book.
Dude, that's so awesome.
Yeah, I don't know how that hasn't come up before, but you said his name and I just had to like interject.
Dude, that's so cool. Wow. But yeah, no, just the writing and the art, especially in this like series, this whole thing is really like top tier. There's some issues that are obviously like better than others. That just goes with a book of this length and this like magnitude.
Yeah, it's bound to happen.
Yeah, but like just on an overall like quality level, just like so good from like start to finish. The first volume especially, like I've of course seen the pages of Batman being broken. Like I feel like what comic fan or really like most people, like I guess not most people, but a lot of people have seen.
No, but it is a very common image. Yeah.
Yeah, like I mean, it's
if you're in that. Yeah, if you're in this
Yeah.
realm, like you've seen it, you've at least seen it, or if you've seen something that pays homage to that moment.
Yeah, like it's such a huge thing, and so like I'd obviously seen it before reading this, but like really like getting into the story, and of course like the first volume, like Bane's origin is so good. It's honestly incredible. It's like a 64-page like special.
Wow.
To like start off the thing, and like it's damn good. Like obviously I knew Bane's like backstory, but like the way that it gets into it and like explores it, like he's just such a good character from the get-go. And so seeing that was really cool. And then he also just has this plan I love too, which is something that kind of I feel gets lost sometimes, it's not really lost now with like King's run. Like King is definitely embracing it.
Definitely. Yeah.
But before this, and like also in like modern media, aside from The Dark Knight Rises, like Nolan got it pretty good there. But like how intelligent Bane is, like he's not just a stupid brute. Like
oh my gosh, his level of intellect is unmatched. And obviously I haven't read Knightfall, but just the way that he manipulates Batman in Tom King's run is just insane. And it really he like does it so subtly, and I feel like that's Tom King's biggest strength. Is just like playing up to these characters' strengths, but doing it very quietly.
It's just, especially with that one too, like that you don't even really like notice until the huge twist in issue 50. Like,
right.
That's when those pieces start to fall, and then it just escalates from there. But yeah, like Bane is just such a master strategist. Like he comes up with these plans, and then he just fucking executes. Like in the first volume of Knightfall, he's just like, okay, I'm gonna like blow a hole in Arkham Asylum and let every villain out into Gotham, and they just rampage the city. And like Batman at this point too has recently recovered from the use of Venom, which shout out to Batman Venom. It's like 4 issues I think. It's a great Batman story and gives the origins to that drug also.
Does that come included in like the Knightfall trades?
It does not.
Okay.
So but
I have to pick that up separately then.
Yeah, it's because it's not essential to the read. It's just something that if you've read it, you're like, oh, okay, that's a little bit more.
It sounds pretty cool, though. I would like to know the origin of that drug a bit.
Yeah, Batman actually like ends up using it, and like he gets he gets messed up from it. It's interesting.
I don't know if I'd want to face the Batman on Venom.
Dude, he's terrifying. But yeah, so like Batman's recovering from that. So like his health at even the start of this, he's like not 100%. And then Bane's just like, all right, I'm gonna let literally every lunatic out of the asylum and have them rampage the city. And so like the first half of Volume 1 is literally just a gauntlet for Batman, like just trying to track down and like take out all these different villains. And like,
wow.
I didn't realize how many like iconic Batman images and like interactions that I've seen, just like the pictures from, were like from this.
Really?
Like, yeah, there's so many moments that I was like, damn, like I didn't know that was in Knightfall. And like I got to like another issue and I was like, damn, that one's here too. Like it's just like hit after hit of just so many great Batman moments.
That's awesome.
And so that was just so cool to see. And then yeah, like literally about like the halfway point, you get Bane just like going into the manor, and he wrecks Batman. And it's like seeing that happen in context and with all the build up to it, like having just gone through that, like it's a whole nother level. Like it sucks on one hand that like I've obviously, seen the image of him being broken and like know that it's coming. But at the same time, like the fact that it's still able to be so powerful, like with me already knowing that, is just a testament to the storytelling and like
100%.
how it's all brought together.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it was so cool to see. So yeah, like Bane comes in and just, he wrecks Batman, he breaks the bat, and then like the second half of Volume 1 is like Bane kind of like taking over Gotham a little bit, and then you get Jean-Paul Valley, who comes in, and Bruce like gives him the mantle of the Batman, and so that like segues into Volume 2, which like I'll admit that Volume 2 is a step down from Volume 1. But
really?
But it's by no means bad. I think it's just like it comes with the fact that like it's not Bruce in the cowl, like, which, not that you have to have Bruce in the cowl, because later on in the story you get Dick Grayson wearing the cowl too, which I'll get into.
Right.
And so like that's not the reason that it steps down a little bit. It's just that like I don't know. It's interesting. I think it might be some of the villains that like Jean-Paul Valley faces, because issue 2 really is the descent of his mental health like into madness, because he's been like brainwashed by Saint Dumas, and he's like dealing with that, and that's I think definitely the highlight of Volume 2, that, and then also just the straight up 90s aesthetic of like his bat suit and just him going absolute like brutal and crazy.
Gotta love that. Gotta love those covers.
Oh dude, yeah, the cover. Oh, Kelly Jones kills it throughout like all the covers. There's a couple other cover artists too that do a really good job. But yeah, like his bat suit, I've always like seen it and been like, oh, that's kind of cool. But like for some reason, it just like clicked in this story. I was like, man, I love this bat suit now. Like it just works really well in the story that's being told. The context they give for like why he's changing it the way that he does, I think helps a lot.
Okay.
But yeah, like just his descent into madness it's shown off really well throughout Volume 2, and it's him just trying to like clean up Gotham to the best that he can, and he's just like so much more brutal than Batman like ever is, and so much more like absolutist in his measures.
Right.
And so that's really interesting to see. It's just the villains that he like faces off against aren't like the strongest. Like one of them is like the Tally Man, who like I'm sure you've never even heard of.
I can't say that I have.
Yeah, there's like there's the Tally Man, and like I can picture some of like all of them in my head, but like I can't even remember all their names. Which just kind of like goes into the point. But yeah, it's still definitely like an enjoyable read, like all the way through. Like I wasn't struggling to read any of it. The whole time, like I was like, okay, yeah, like this is cool, this is still fun,
it's cohesive.
Yeah, and it's also one of the other things that I think is a strength of issue 2 is the city, like Gordon and Catwoman's in it some, and like Robin, them like reacting to a different Batman, like because they really do show Gotham's reaction in a sense to how Batman is different now. Yeah,
that has to be an interesting dynamic to see play out.
Yeah, it's really it takes a big toll on Gordon, which I'm glad that they show. Like he's pretty pissed, honestly. He's like, he like doesn't know what to do. He's like, I always thought it was one guy, and like now there's someone else. Obviously.
Yeah, because that's like a total mind fuck for him. At this point, I'm sure he's like at least placed some of his trust in Batman and what he's been doing, and then for this guy to come in and just start like beating people senseless and taking measures that Batman never would take. He's just like, I don't know what to do. On top of like everything that Bane has already unleashed on the city, you know, that's got to be crazy.
Yeah, exactly. They just all like compounds, and like and the fact that like Jean Paul just won't listen to anyone, like except for the hallucinations in his head,
Sure.
which isn't very good for everyone else. Yeah, so like it's really cool to see how that all like plays out, and then towards the end of like volume 2, or actually not even towards the end, like the very last issue is like the first time that you see Bruce Wayne again in volume 2. Which
Okay.
is crazy.
Wow. That's...
There's like there's like 600 pages of Batman comics with no Bruce Wayne in it.
That's
which
insane
is
to think about.
Yeah, I honestly feel really bad for anyone at the time who like wasn't a fan of Jean Paul like as Batman, because like this is a long like it felt kind of long for me, and I was sitting there reading it in like a couple days, and like
Yeah.
this took place over like I'd imagine at least 6 months. Like
Yeah.
It's split over between like Batman, Shadow of the Bat, and Detective Comics. So like there was a couple coming out like per month, I would imagine.
Imagine pulling those as they were coming out, and that just being excruciating for you to have to get through.
Oh yeah, dude, it would suck. Like I definitely feel very bad for anyone who like was like, I don't like this. So yeah, because it's so wild to think about that many pages of Batman with no Bruce Wayne.
Yeah, I can't even imagine reading, like, not being a total like head over heels Batman fan. I can't imagine reading 600 pages of Batman comics without my Batman in it.
Dude, yeah, it's just like unheard of, pretty much. Like you don't really get that. Like,
I guess to a lesser extent, like just to connect the dots between our like fandoms a little bit, I guess that would be like I didn't jump on comics at this point, but like reading Superior Spider-Man with Doc Ock in Spider-Man's body. I guess like you're seeing Peter Parker still, but it's Doc Ock, so I can imagine that Spider-Man fans probably had a similar frustration there.
Yeah, that's a good,
and it's
just
just
parallel.
It's just crazy to think about, like, because people I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I always commend creators whenever they like do that, when they have the like commitment to be like, yeah, this is what we're gonna do. Like,
yeah, because you have to know going into that there's going to be a ton of backlash, and you have to just be like confident enough, like, no, we're gonna ride this out, and then we'll bring things back to the status quo at the end, so that payoff is like, the payoff is good, but the payoff is even better for those fans who were kind of upset. But there's a whole, like, I feel like there's a fine line you have to walk with that stuff, but more so than anything, you just need that level of confidence to know that you can do that.
Yeah, it takes a lot to be able to do that. Like,
Yeah.
I can't imagine that stress, honestly.
No, oh my gosh, are you
Especially
kidding me?
if you get like a couple issues, or like however far in, and like you start seeing the like reaction, and you're still like writing the like not even like 3/4 of the way through,
Yeah.
whatever, you know. You're just,
You
like,
can't just be sitting there
fuck,
like
oh yeah, that'd be so stressful. But so I commend the creators for doing that, like sticking to it.
Definitely.
But yeah, just so like volume 2, you know, doesn't have Bruce, and like he shows up in the last issue of it, and then like volume 3, you get like Bruce's return, and I love in this that they show him like training again.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which is nice to see, because it's
Yeah.
like he like his body is like recovering some, and like he like, you know, has the skills like up there, but they've like, he's almost like forgotten the muscle memory to an extent. Like, it's
Sure.
just like he has to like get it back, and he's like not there yet. And so there's a pretty decent amount of time where you're seeing him like recover and train and like try to like get back into it, and like having to like fight with himself. And like there's a really cool thing that they keep on going to, which is him standing on top of the like tallest tower like in Gotham, and he's like flashing back to like the first time that he was like in the costume, and he like jumped off of it, and
Wow.
like, he, you know, like grappled to the like a gargoyle, and like did the swing perfectly, and like landed. And he was like, it was so like easy then, and like he kept on going up to it and being like, I'm not ready yet, like I can't, I'm not there.
That's such interesting imagery, and you're really making me want to go and pick this up and like spend the time with this book, because you don't think about, especially with the medium of comics, and again, like just kind of tying it into like the craft side of things, a lot of what comic book creators tend to like lean on is the fact that their readers are kind of putting together dots between the panels. But when a comic kind of just spells this stuff out for you, because it's so crucial to like the story that's being told, you kind of appreciate it more, because I feel like as readers we always see that kind of like training stuff in our minds, and we just take it at face value that these heroes are at where they are in their careers on the page, and we don't think about that. We don't necessarily consciously think about what it took for them to get there. So to see Batman have to like build that back up, that's got to be so compelling.
It is, and it's so satisfying too, and it also gives credence to like what he just went through, because like
Definitely.
he literally got like just beaten and has his back broken, and so like if he just comes back and is just like back like 100% like immediately, it just like it would undermine the ordeal that he just experienced, and you're kind of like,
course.
well, okay, I guess. And so, yeah, it's really important that they showed that, and it works really, really well too. It's honestly some of my favorite like moments in the whole series, is seeing him try to like get back to it.
Because it shows like a lot of his humanity outside of just like being the man who has to, you know, face down all these criminals and keep Gotham a safer place. You know, it's like that shows some of his inner conflict, I'm sure, because he's like, again, he's not getting right back up and right back to it. So there's got to be some like turmoil within him about just like everything that's been going on.
Yeah, there really is. There's a lot of conflict there too. There's even like he has reservation about like coming back at all.
Wow.
He's like, because at one point he's like, I passed the mantle on, and like Jean Paul's like doing it. Like maybe I can just be Bruce. Like maybe I don't have to do this.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah. Which like reading that, I was just like, damn, like I didn't expect that like at all.
Well, I mean, because he's just given the time to sit with that like that revelation, and once it comes to him, he's like you know, he puts on the mask, so it, like, you know, Batman can be anybody. Why do any of these superheroes wear masks? At the core of it, it's like, you know, if this isn't at the forefront of their mind, it's at the forefront of the mind of the creators that like these characters can be anybody. But to see Bruce kind of like deal with that and kind of come to that realization that he could just possibly live out the rest of his life as Bruce Wayne is so interesting to me, because I feel like I've never read anything where he's questioned himself like that, like to that extent.
Yeah.
And
the only thing...
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No.
The only thing I can think like similarly is Snyder did it in like Super Heavy, but like he literally loses his memories in that. Like
that's where I have to tap out, because I haven't read the New 52.
Okay.
Please don't kill me.
But like, no, I totally understand. A lot of people haven't. But like, in that, it's not even him like being like, oh yeah, I can just walk away from this. It's him being like, I don't remember being that.
Yeah, which is a totally different take on it. But that's got to be so interesting as well. Like the way that that creators approach these different kind of dilemmas and impose them on the heroes is so fascinating.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah,
but. No, just the fact that he like thinks about that and is like, well, maybe I don't have to do this. And then I mean, he gets obviously like roped back in, because Robin's like, hey, this dude you kind of passed it over to is a little bit of a lunatic. Yeah, we kind of need you to come back, bro. And so like he does for a while, and like he comes back and like, you know, like takes on Azrael and like does that, but then I am assuming something else like happened, because like it's honestly, I was a little like, okay, interesting, because like he comes back and like does that, but then he like leaves again. And,
really?
Like, yeah, he like passes the mantle over to like Dick, who by the way is in his like classic Nightwing costume for a little bit in the story, which like honestly have never loved that costume more. Like it just it fits so well like in this book. Like again, it's just that like 90s like it works.
I can picture it just fitting perfectly in that aesthetic.
Yeah, and he's got the mullet too. Like it's
perfect.
It's good. Yeah. And so then you get like Dick Grayson being Batman for like a while, and he's Batman and Tim Drake is Robin, which they're an awesome Batman and Robin. This is the only thing of them being that I've read. I feel like that might be the only thing of them being Batman and Robin that there is. But just because of like the way the timelines work out, I don't think that Dick is ever like in the cowl again while Tim is still Robin.
That's so cool though.
Yeah, dude. Oh, it's awesome seeing their interactions, because like they're both pretty like, I mean, Tim is kind of lighthearted, and like Dick to an extent is. At this point, he's maybe in one of his darker like aspects, because like the things with the Titans have like fallen apart. His relationship with Starfire like fell apart. And so he doesn't really know exactly where he belongs. And so that's part of the reason that he like is so willing to do this. But then he's also just like he'll do anything for Bruce. Like
Right.
He's just at that point where like he'll like if Bruce needs him, he's there, and so
Yeah.
that's why he's like doing it. But like he has such a hard time like in the mantle. He's like, I don't know like if I can do this or how long I can do this. He's like he like doesn't feel like he's Batman still. Like he's like I've made mistakes as Robin and as Nightwing. Like how am I supposed to be Batman and be able to live up to that?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not nearly as well versed in Batman's history as you are, but one of the reasons that he kind of broke away from Bruce was because he just felt like he couldn't get out of his shadow, right?
Yeah, no, that's like pretty much the main reason. Like,
so
he couldn't get out of his shadow, and they would just like clash. Like, because I mean, he's an adolescent kid and growing into adulthood. So
yeah, so that has to be a crazy thing for him to kind of face in this moment too. Is like not only does he have to like take on all the responsibility of like taking up that mantle, but he also now has to become the thing that he was trying to separate himself from.
Yeah,
and that's just that's got to be so cool.
It works a number on his conscience. It's interesting because like especially at first he's very much like I'll do this and then some things happen like in the story and like he gets past like a certain point and he's literally just like I need Bruce to come back. Like
wow,
he's just like I can't. He's like I don't think I can do this forever. Like
and how could he? I mean he's like. He's Nightwing. He's Dick Grayson. He is not Bruce Wayne, and Bruce Wayne is just like a tank of a man. And obviously, after coming back from having his back broken, like he has to be the one to be Batman.
Yeah, and there's I'm so glad you like mentioned that because there's a line that Dick says before he takes up the mantle again, but him and Tim are like in the Batcave and they're talking about Jean Paul, and Dick says like Bruce might have a successor, but he'll never have a replacement.
Oh, wow. That's kudos to that writing there because that's amazing.
Yeah, and like I read that and I have chills now like saying it again and I'm just like damn.
Yeah,
like
dude, you give me some goosebumps over here.
Like it's so true though. Like because I mean, yeah, like other people can be Batman, but like no one's Bruce Wayne.
Exactly.
Like no one's like that. No one's on that level.
No.
Man, making me emotional.
That's so good. I need to read this.
Yeah, so Volume 3 like has a bunch of great like Dick and Tim moments, them being Batman and Robin, and then of course by the end like you do get Bruce coming back and being like in the Cape and Cowl. Yeah, it's such a good story. Like I was not disappointed at all. I read it like I'm proud of myself for how quickly I read it. Honestly, like I was reading like probably like 6 or plus like issues a day. Like
less than 2 weeks, man. That's a tip of the hat to you, sir.
It's like 1900. It's 1900 pages in like less than 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But yeah, it was really really good. I'm very excited to be able to be like like I've read that now. Like just be like I did it.
Quite the accomplishment.
Yeah, it was a lot. It didn't disappoint. It's just there's a reason that it is like talked about the way that it is.
Oh, definitely.
If I had to rank the volumes, I'd do 1, 3, 2, probably. Volume 1 is just absolute like masterclass in like storytelling, like all the way. And then just the character exploration that it does in all of the volumes, I think for everyone involved is really good. Like so many characters get a chance to shine. You see like pretty much all of Batman's villains, like at some point or another, like they'll pop up for at least an issue.
Right on.
Which is really, really cool. Scarecrow has a really cool arc in like volume 2, I think. I
love Scarecrow, man. I'm so glad that he gets his chance to shine. I feel like he shines more often than people ever consider.
Yeah.
So that's cool to hear.
Dude, Scarecrow is one of my favorites. I think he's so underrated. But yeah, he's like a 4 or 5 issue like arc.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that's really cool to see. I mean, just so many great moments like all across the board. It's a lot. It's a big book. Like they're all 3 are like huge books, but I definitely like recommend it to anyone who like might be interested. Like
yeah, I'll definitely have to pick it up.
It's worth it. It's a lot, but it's worth it.
Cool.
So I mean, I guess that kind of ends my Knightfall whole like spiel. So Evan, what have you been reading recently?
So this is an arc that took place the last like full arc that wrapped in Nick Spencer and Ryan Ottley's Amazing Spider-Man run. Nick Spencer wrote this whole arc, but it was actually Humberto Ramos who was on most of the penciling and inking for this. It's the Hunted arc, Craven's story. There were a couple of filler issues where I'm just trying to find his name because everybody has to get their due, you know.
100%.
Oh, Gerardo Sandoval. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right, but he filled in a couple of issues. I think just 2 issues during this series. The art is beautiful all the way through. I love Humberto Ramos's take on Spider-Man. I didn't like. He's one of those artists who some people grow up with and like that's their definitive Spider-Man. He's not that for me, but I definitely appreciate the way that he illustrates not only Spider-Man but like all of his rogues and how he like battles his rogues. I don't know, the action pieces are like really solid in this. So it's another kind of like just similarly to Knightfall, a bunch of Spider-Man's villains end up making appearances. The basic plot is like, so I haven't read, and I'm kind of kicking myself for this. I haven't read Craven's Last Hunt, which I know like the pretty much the beats of, and this is obviously kind of an homage to that, but also like a sort of continuation of Craven's story from that. But I definitely need to go back and read it now after going through this. So basically what it is Craven is back from the dead. I don't know how he came back, but he essentially just went out on his own terms. I don't know if he took his own life or what, but he's back now. I don't know how he's back. I'm really setting this up well, like I know what I'm talking about, right?
I mean, hey, dude, a lot happens in comics just all the time.
It's great. So on the first page, though, Craven is narrating pretty much this entire story arc, and I have to commend Nick Spencer phenomenally for the way that he wrote Craven, because he's just very articulate and well-spoken and almost poetic. I shouldn't say almost poetic. It is very poetic. But in a couple of the first panels of this story, Craven is saying how he used to be this beast, this hunter, and now he's just a ghost. He went out on his own terms, and now, inexplicably, to me anyway, he's come back to life in a world where, and this does something that's kind of interesting. So you know how like comic book timelines don't match up with like our world, like real time. Comic book characters usually stay pretty much the same age like forever.
For decades. They just
but this kind of alludes to how things change like in real time. Like there's a quote by Craven saying like, now in the world everything is compromised. I've been returned to a world I do not belong in, cursed to roam endlessly through the decaying paths. I hate everything I see. There's no dignity in this existence, no dignity anywhere. And he kind of like goes on and throughout the series elaborates on that, and he's just very disenchanted with the way that man works, specifically like those of high like affluence or, you know, power within government or whatever. They think that they're entitled to go into places like jungles and forests and deserts and just kind of quote unquote hunt, but they don't deserve the title of hunter because they think that because they have this one form of power that gives them power over the animal kingdom. And Craven is very displeased with that. Not only does he not want to be alive, because he had such because he went out on his own terms and he was like at peace, he's been brought back into a world where he doesn't want to be living, and he also just is so disgusted by everything that he sees. So he pretty much...
Man, why am I on Craven's side so far?
Believe me, dude, this does not paint... I mean, he does some horrific stuff within this, but he is by no means... I wouldn't call him the villain of this. Like, he's trying to get what he deserves in his eyes, and he's also trying to teach these people a lesson, which is kind of what he does by enacting this plan. So he goes through and he says, I don't know what this curse is that he's referring to, but he's been cursed. I don't know if it happened like after he came back, but he's saying that he's cursed, and the only one who can kill him is the spider. And so he can be at peace once the spider kills him, but he can't do that yet. So what he ends up doing is going through and like he clones himself, right? And he raises like this batch of Kraven clones as his children. And he has them go out and do various tasks like hunting and whatever to see who like his successor will be. And eventually, dude, there's this one clone who, after they've all completed their missions, he goes and kills all of the other Kraven clones. And that is just like mortifying to see. And then he comes back to Kraven and tells him what he's done. And you think Kraven's like upset, but he's like, you are the hunter. And so he becomes this more like he becomes his son, quote unquote son clone, whatever you want to call him, essentially becomes the new Kraven like in his prime, because like the actual Kraven is like looking to like kick himself into the ground again, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's so interesting.
Yeah,
it's
kind of convoluted, but it's not. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just what a way to like establish a like new like Kraven in their prime. Like I never, well, like you get two like really unique storytelling avenues there, because you get the Kraven who's like disgusted with everything and like kind of done and like beaten almost.
Yeah.
And you still also get like a badass Kraven who's like, I'm gonna destroy everything.
And that's exactly what it is, dude. He's just a savage. He's like the total. I don't want to say he's like the polar opposite of Kraven, but I feel like these two versions are like two halves of a whole. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's so interesting to see like not only their relationship, but the relationship that they individually have with Spider-Man, because this younger Kraven is just like pure rage, pure instinct, pure just like animalisticness. And the older Kraven is like, you know, he's very like collected and like calculating almost. He seems like less of a villain and more of just like he seems like more of a presence than anything, like, you know, like just kind of behind the curtain, so to speak. So he pretty much puts this whole thing together that's kind of in the same vein of The Most Dangerous Game. I don't.
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah. So what he does is he brings all of these like one percenters and also all of these rogues who have taken like the names of animals and stuff and throws them into this arena, and basically just has them like going at each other because he doesn't think that either party deserves to call themselves hunters, which is very interesting. So he's doing all of this before he can get to the point where he's like pretty much forcing Spider-Man's hand to kill him, which is what he initially sets out to do. There are so many beats, like, and I'm trying not to summarize, but it's kind of like there's a lot of information. But so he pretty much like has taken Kurt Connor's son, and Kurt Connors at this point has like an inhibitor chip to prevent the lizard from coming out. And he gets Peter and Kurt Connors in prison together and pretty much pins this choice on Peter to either let Kurt Connors' son be killed by Kraven, the new Kraven, or rip this inhibitor chip out of Kurt Connors, potentially killing him, but also potentially getting the lizard out to save his son. So that turmoil within Spider-Man is so interesting to see, and it kind of like emotionally and mentally breaks Spider-Man, because he has to face this choice, and for a while he thinks he kills the lizard, and Kraven wanted to bring him to that point so that he could then go forth and kill Kraven, like just out of his rage, and he wanted Spider-Man to become this animal. He keeps telling Spider-Man that he's this like he is this hunter. The spider is the most feared hunter, and he just needs to like tap into that. And of course, Spider-Man's always going against that grain, trying to find any avenue where he doesn't need to face down that choice. But you see him yeah, go ahead.
Can I just say that I totally agree with Kraven and the fact that spiders are like these insane hunters. I am absolutely petrified of spiders, bro. Can't do it. Cannot do it. I'll run so far away from a spider. I see like a spider, in my house and like I lose it, I'm like, oh, I gotta burn the whole thing down.
You've moved like 8 times.
Yeah, can't do it.
I'm very fascinated with spiders. Like, they are so fierce, but I'm so interested to like watch them do their thing. Like, there's a couple of spiders on webs like out front of my house, and like I'll just sit there and watch them like kind of calculate like how they're finding their prey. I don't know. Those bigger spiders, once they get too big, like I'm definitely in the same boat. Like, get me the hell out of here. But I'm very fascinated by that.
Skin's crawling.
So yeah, so Spider-Man is really heavily dealing with this conflict within him that Kraven has pretty much just like poisoned him with, and I kind of use that as a segue because he also, like, when he first captured Spider-Man, he used this like kind of hallucinogen poison to give Spider-Man like visions of Mary Jane back at her apartment being like brutally murdered. And this whole time he's like, I need to figure out what's going on within this arena, but I also need to do it quick so that I can get back to Mary Jane and make sure that she's okay. So I think that one of the reasons that Kraven did that in the first place was to kind of push his emotions to the forefront and to really like make Spider-Man think less on his feet and more just like react emotionally to things, which I have to commend. Like, this is a testament to Nick Spencer's writing, but also just to Kraven as a character. Like, he is just... I feel like he's an underrated Spider-Man villain because he, like, almost similarly to Bane, he really, like, takes the time to know his enemy and know the ins and out of their weaknesses like a true hunter would. And the reason that he's so disenchanted with everything, like, really shines through while you see him putting together and executing this plan, you know, because like that's the way a hunter should be carrying themselves for an end goal, not just for sport or not just because they think they can, you know, like there is a reason for the hunt, which is so compelling.
There's an exact like method to everything.
Exactly. But it's so interesting because like Peter kind of catches wind of this, and the villains who are still in this arena are really doing a damage to the one percenters, which is just very interesting to see. Vulture kind of takes up a leadership role, and Kraven commends him because like he's like, Vulture knows what needs to be done in order to stay alive. Like the Vulture is a true hunter, and that's really cool to see because I feel like the Vulture is another kind of like hokey 60s villain, you know, but there are some like, you know, obviously with Homecoming, Michael Keaton is very menacing as the Vulture, and in recent comic books, like they're doing a lot to play up these more like campy villains, which I really appreciate. So all of that's taking place, and then after Spider-Man frees the Lizard, he thinks he's dead, but the Lizard actually like ends up waking up and then going to save his son. So after all of that, Spider-Man is able to confront Kraven and really have a conversation with him that's like, you know, your way is not the only way. Like, think about things the way that I do. There are things to live for, and there are ways to carry yourself, and there are ways to look at humanity without being so disgusted, because you can see the good in it. You can see that not everybody is taking a stance like these one percenters who just take things because they can. Because for every person who's like that, there are people who are not even just like, obviously I'm not even talking in just the realm of hunting, but just in the realm of humanity. Just there are ways to kind of alleviate that the stress of I don't know what the stress of how these people carry themselves in society, if that makes any sense.
No, yeah, it does.
And I'm just trying to find the panel where he's like, where Kraven kind of like realizes this. Oh, and I just flipped to it. So Spider-Man's talking to him, and he's saying to Kraven after he's kind of beaten him to a pulp, he's saying, you want me to believe that I have to be like you to survive, to protect everything that I care about, but you don't understand. That's what I'm trying to protect them from. We are, so yeah, dude. Nick Spencer is like top tier Spider-Man writing, dude. He goes on and he's like, you know, we are more than blood and bone. I learned from the people who raised me, and I see it all the time in people that I love. We weren't just meant to chase and devour each other, constantly looking over our shoulders or searching out some new victim. We are here to help and care for one another, lift each other up, give ourselves to other people, yada, yada, yada. Very, very heroic Spider-Man speech. And then it ends.
Heroic speech.
Yeah, right. And then it ends, and Kraven's just like kind of cackling at him, and he says, "I finally understand." And he tells, I forgot. He's working with Arcade. I don't know if you're familiar with that villain.
Not really, actually.
Okay, so he's just like he's kind of like a tech guy. He's kind of like Mysterio, where his things are like they're not necessarily illusions, but they're like just like simulations, more or less, that he programs to just wreak havoc. So Kraven had enlisted him to create this like most dangerous game simulation. Okay. So then Kraven, after hearing this speech, is like, "Arcade, shut it down. We're done with this." And then Kraven like lets Spider-Man go, whatever. But like the way that the last couple of panels are drawn, Kraven has access for whatever reason to like a bunch of black suits, a bunch of Spider-Man's black suits. And this is so like heavy, man. At the end of this, so he wanted Spider-Man to be in the black suit when they fought. So after he like drugged Spider-Man and he woke up, Spider-Man woke up in the black suit. Obviously, all of this is calling back to Kraven's last hunt.
Yeah.
So off panel we see, Kraven actually puts on one of the black suits, and because his son is so animalistic, he sees Spider-Man, what he thinks is Spider-Man, running through trying to escape, and his son ends up killing him. But he said, like, the curse said that he could only die by the hands of the spider, and he killed himself. Like, that was like so emotional for me, because it's like it was so poetic, and it was so just like the journey from the beginning of like this was Kraven's end goal. Like, he wanted to die, but even more so now, I feel like he was more in control of that death than he would have been if Spider-Man had just like gone off of his instincts and just like kind of ferociously like beaten this guy, you know. And then Kraven's son figures out that, you know, he takes the mask off because I think he sees Spider-Man like swinging away, and he's just like devastated. And in the epilogue, he's kind of coming back from the funeral, and Kraven left him a note, and he pretty much said like, "You're the hunter now. You're Kraven the hunter." And we see him like he just looks like the spitting image of Kraven, which is so cool. Like that passing of the mantle, and kind of Kraven's humanity coming through all of this to kind of join sides with Spider-Man and see things through both of those lenses, because I feel like you were saying, there's validity to how Kraven was feeling, you know, but he also realized that there was another way aside from just forcing Spider-Man's hand to kill him. He kind of I don't want to say died a hero, but he died with the mindset of a hero, because he realized that there is, for all of this other nonsense that goes on in like within humanity, there are things to like be happy about, and there are things to sort of protect more than just like your status as a hunter, you know?
Yeah.
So compelling.
Such phenomenal character work.
Yeah,
like, all
it's
angles.
Like when a writer really makes you feel for and sympathize with a villain, you know that they're doing something right, because it's not just like, oh, here's a bad guy for the hero to punch, you know? Yeah,
there's so many more layers to that.
Exactly, and you really get a sense of like what even brought them to that point.
And it elevates the story completely. And I know there's like a common quote that like a hero is only as good as his villain.
And that's absolutely true, because they bring out those traits in each other, and to see them like a protagonist and an antagonist play off of each other in such a way, it's, you know, it just makes for a better story, and it really keeps the reader gripped.
Yeah, it just keeps on like upping the like the emotional and just the story level. Like
Yeah.
each time they're able to like go back and forth like that.
Exactly.
Like, you're like, oh, okay, well, like I see this like angle, and then they like come back with something else. And you're like, oh, okay, well, I see that too, and like, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, so another thing that I wanted to like just touch on, maybe to like wrap this up, is the epilogue, because it sets up a lot of really cool stuff, just in terms of like where this Spider-Man comic is going, this run for Spencer and Otley, and the epilogue of Hunted. Ryan Otley comes back to do the art, and like, man, this guy really knows how to draw Spider-Man. Like, his style is just so, like, it's very stylized, but it's also just, it's not like too excessive. Like, it's like the perfect amount of stylization to fit a Spider-Man comic, and it's so cool. Like, off the rip, I just like to go off because I'm geeking out about his art now. When he was announced, I was like, oh, that kind of looks like cartoony and like a little kiddish, but seeing Spider-Man in action and seeing the way that he draws the dynamics between him and villains is just really cool. So shout out to Ryan Otley. So this goes through, and there's a lot of cool things that happen in the epilogue. We see Kraven's, we see his funeral, and the way that, I don't want to call him his son because it's not his son, but the way that his clone reacts to his death is much like how an overly emotional child of a deceased parent would act. He's very enraged, and he goes through and like just demolishes a bunch of stuff in Kraven's house, and then he breaks down and cries, which is so like it's not only out of character for this rage monster, but it kind of brings him closer to Kraven as we see him in his last moments. You know what I mean? Like in that instance, not only does he seem like a son, but he also seems like he's becoming Kraven, because then he finds that note that Kraven leaves for him, telling him that he's like the new hunter. So we get some emotion on that end of the spectrum, and then we also get emotion back on Peter's side, which, you know, he's been dealing with this problem in the back of his head of feeling like something seriously wrong is happening to MJ, and he couldn't get to her, even though, you know, Kraven drugged him to make him hallucinate and feel like, you know, just like keep him on his toes and keep him kind of like emotionally driven. He just had this feeling that whatever he saw was actually wrong, and that's kind of where this new villain that Nick Spencer and Ryan Otley have been developing, and like they've been keeping him in the shadows, but he kind of comes to the forefront now, leading up to the current issue of Spider-Man, which I haven't read yet, but that's where this new villain makes his debut. This unnamed menace has been narrating a couple of issues out throughout this arc, and the way that narration is written and the way that Spider-Man talks about these visions, you really think that he's going to get back there and she's going to be dead, right? So he goes there, and these visions all kind of have the same feel to them. There's like broken glass, blood, and MJ on the floor. So he gets back there after like these shields are brought down from around Central Park, where this whole dangerous game kind of simulation is taking place. He has some backup from a bunch of Avengers and some members of the Fantastic Four, which so cool. Like, it's so cool to see this roster of characters like pop up in a Spider-Man comic, because, you know, you don't get to see that often. So like, it's really played up when you do get to see these epic team moments. Short-lived, which I also appreciate, because again, this is a Spider-Man comic, so I don't want to see all that team stuff, but it's cool to like catch a quick glance and then get back to Spider-Man's story.
It also just helps seed it like in the universe. Like,
right, exactly. Like, they don't beat you over the head with it, but it's like, hey, all of these other heroes are here to help as well. And I really appreciate that. Like, they really walk that line, and they don't like lean too heavily to either side. So Spider-Man is like, I gotta go, you guys got this, and he makes it back to his apartment, and he sees the windows broken, he sees the glass and blood on the floor, and then he's like devastated. But then MJ comes out of the bathroom, and she tells him that she tripped over one of his costumes and put her arm through the window. And he's just kind of standing there looking at her, and then there's this epic 4-panel page where there's virtually no dialogue, but he just starts crying and embraces her and kisses her, because like the Parker luck is, either Spider-Man wins or Peter Parker wins, but they usually never both win. And in this moment, he has won he has won on all fronts. His love is safe, and he has gotten through to a villain to the point where like he realized the error of his ways, and that the way that he needed to go about whatever turmoil he was facing like could be compromised for the sake of humanity, because humanity is not all bad. So he just like turned a villain around essentially, and then also got to go home to his love, which is like, you don't get to see that. Like the true Spider-Man moments are like one or the other, and you see him defeated on some front. But even still, this is like one of the most Spider-Man things that I have read. And I feel like I say that about everything that I read Spider-Man, but it's true, because like you really know the creative team knows the character when you pick up on these iconic moments that they all leave for the history of the character,
Yeah. I mean, it's just a testament to the writing of like all the creators for the character.
Right, because there's so many of these moments for them to build on, and then they can in turn like take that and make their own, for lack of a better word, Spider-Man moment out of it,
Yeah.
And just kind of like another like geek out thing for this. So I mentioned that Vulture kind of played a pivotal role in the whole simulation, but he had some people working underneath him that he's keeping along for a team called the Savage Six, and it's going to consist of Vulture, Rhino, Stegron, Scorpion, Tarantula, and King Cobra. And the lineup is so cool. Like, I love like any iteration of like the Sinister Six, the Savage Six, whatever they're called. It's so cool because it's always like such an interesting roster.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious to see what they do with this particular team in the future, because I feel like they wouldn't set this up and then just like throw it away.
That's such an interesting
So that's
dynamic.
really cool.
Like, there's so many.
Yeah, it really is.
Whenever you get 6 people, like, on any team, be it heroes or villains, like, there's always such interesting conversations and clash and just things that come out of that.
Oh, I know. And it's really cool because of this. I like to play like the Savage Six because they are all like animal hunter themed villains.
Yeah.
And they're just like, just seeing them like in this spread that it's not a spread, but like this like wide shot, them all standing together. It's so cool because they're all so menacing, and I want to just see them like wreaking havoc on New York.
I feel like you're going to get your wish.
I really hope so. So we'll have to revisit it when it happens.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have to read this arc too, honestly.
Yeah, dude. I think the trade is coming out next month, and I really can't recommend it enough because there is a lot of emotional weight to it. There's a lot of just awesome action set pieces, and there's just a lot to read below the surface. And I definitely like going back to like how we were talking about. There's like a bunch of just like classic. There's a bunch of like classic material out there for fans like of our caliber that we just like have not had time yet to touch. Like for me, that's Kraven's Last Hunt. But reading this, I'm like, well, I know all of the beats of that story, and I got like most of the references in this from that. But I still just feel like I'm doing myself a disservice as a Spider-Man fan, having not read it. And that's the beauty of comics, man. You read something that you're interested in, and then you find your way back to kind of the origins of like what got this sect of the industry to where it is, and you can just follow those points back to their original creation, and I feel like you get a greater sense of appreciation for not only the characters but the medium itself.
Oh yeah, there's just so much that like leads into something else. Like you read one thing and you're like, oh well, that makes me want to read like this other thing, and then you read that other thing and you're like, well, this makes me want to read like that other thing. and you're like,
exactly, it's a never-ending chain.
Yeah.
But it's a good like we used to say when we had this podcast, however long ago that was, it's a good problem to have. It really is.
yeah, like there's just always so much to read. Like it,
You're never without content.
yeah, I know. I was talking to someone, I can't remember who it was exactly, like the other day. I think it actually might have been Nathan, who like writes for or works on the site with us.
Shout out, Nathan.
Yeah, shout out. I know he actually wants to be on this at some point. So, but anyway.
Oh, by all means.
Yeah, but he was talking. He was like, because he started reading like relatively recently, and he's been going through a lot of books on like Marvel Unlimited and the DC Universe app. And he was like, man, I'm reading like 6 to like 8 books a day, but like he was like, I just feel like I'm so behind. And I was like, hey man, gonna let you know right now, that feeling will never go away. Like it's just,
you will never feel like you're not behind.
yeah, it's just maybe when I'm like 40 I won't, but like even then I still doubt it. Like there's just so many books that have already come out and that are constantly coming out where like it's a perpetual game of catch up, which like you just said, like it's a good problem to have. I'm glad that there's so much like good content that I still haven't consumed, but
yeah, because I took like, going through this last semester as an undergrad and then moving, I really didn't have the time to set aside to just divulge in comic book reading as I wanted to, because I didn't want it to feel like a chore. I didn't want it to feel like I had to do it. And those books will always be there. Like it does seem daunting, especially if you haven't yet jumped into comics. But once you jump in, it's like, catching up with old friends. It's like you never left, and it's so easy to just lose yourself. And your thoughts always come back to, well, I haven't read this yet. I haven't read that yet. It's like, it is daunting, but you feel some sense of comfort in that almost, because there is so much material and there is so much for you to appreciate that you don't need to make it feel like it's a chore. You can just take it as it goes, and you don't need to read everything. You can just find your niche in whatever, like, whether it be a character or a specific publisher or whatever you find yourself interested in. Just taking your own time to dive into all of that is the best like your best medicine in this industry for that problem.
Oh yeah, exactly, just all of that. And then I find myself now with like an interesting, I guess it's kind of a dilemma, but like I'm torn between the books that I haven't read that I want to read, and then also rereading the books that I like love a lot.
Oh,
I'm like,
yes,
because I'm like, man, I really want to reread this, but I'm like, man, I also have these like 20 books in my in my list that I like have already purchased that I haven't read. So.
Yeah, honestly, that's how I feel with like a bunch of the trades that I've been picking up. I'm like, why am I buying these? I have current stuff that I haven't read yet.
Yeah, I've had to impose I try to like not buy new stuff when I've got stuff that I've already read or not read.
Yeah.
But, things happen.
You tend to break that rule sometimes.
I was really good about it for a solid like 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
But it happens.
But it just adds stuff to your catalog, man, and it's just like you take it as you go, and it's not going anywhere. It's just stuff that you'll always have, and whenever you get to it, and then at that point you can appreciate it.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, like it can be like kind of daunting, but I think that at least for me, it's gotten less so when I just like I was saying a minute ago, just completely accepted the fact I was like, I'll never be caught up, and that's okay.
Oh yeah,
like
yeah.
I don't need to be. It's nice to always have something to look forward to.
Exactly. Like I probably have close to maybe 2.5, 3 short boxes worth of stuff that I haven't read. But once I threw myself back into it, I caught up first and foremost on Spider-Man. And like I said, I'm now going through Batman, and it's like, it's quick. In like the grand scheme of things, like you're going through these issues, and it's just like you can't put them down, especially with the stuff that you really find yourself invested in. You really like, you pick it up, and it's like you never left. Like I said, you can just take your time and also just enjoy going through it, and you kind of wonder how you ever fell out of it to begin with, but it's just it's never ending.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's just there's so much there. I'm thankful for it. I'm always happy to.
Me too, man, because this is the stuff that I found myself, not to get too much into it, but like this is the kind of stuff that I want to be doing, being a creative myself. Little self-plug here for my first issue of my book From Beyond,
which was fantastic.
Going through, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. But going through even like that, it wasn't a full length comic book. It was 8 pages of story. But even going through that and kind of seeing seeing a fraction of like what this creative process is, I have a greater appreciation for it when I'm reading it. And it's just, I don't know, there's so much that goes into this craft that is to be appreciated, and you really want to like sit down with it. If you're somebody who is looking to get into comics and it seems daunting, the best advice that I feel like anybody who is a comic book fan already will give you is just throw yourself in. Find what pulls you and catches your eye, or, you know, do a little bit of research into the characters that you think you might be interested in reading, and then just go for it, because that is the only way you will truly appreciate everything that this medium has to offer. Because like we said, it's just something that is like a never-ending cycle, and you'll find one thing and then it'll put you onto something else, and then that'll put you onto something else, and then you'll have our problem of never being caught up because you're so invested in this medium at that point.
Yeah. And I think also like another thing that I tell people if they're first trying to get into it, I'm like, okay, well first, like like you were just saying, like what's a character that you think you'd be interested in? And like
right.
A lot of people at first, they like want to worry about like the full, like the big picture of like everything like happening in the universe and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, don't. Just pick one thing that you think you'll be interested in, and like just focus on that like at first. And like the more that you read, the more the big picture will start to make sense, and the more that like
exactly
it'll all just kind of work, and you'll just like, okay. And then also I feel like everyone kind of reads it like sort of differently. Like
absolutely,
like there's so many different ways that you could like take in the huge variety of books that there are, and like how they interact with each other, and like how you want to choose to digest like everything, like. And so there's just there's so much option like in this medium, which is just so great.
Yeah, and like I feel like a lot of it too has to do with like personal experiences within like just the daily going-ons of life. You know, you tend to gravitate towards characters that you can relate to, and that's how a lot of these characters were created, and how a lot of them are written to be on some level or another relatable. And like we were saying before, you know, how personal experiences and just the way that we read these comics, like what we take out of them kind of almost determines what we read, because we see this as like we see ourselves in some of these characters, and we want to be able to continue seeing ourselves in these characters. So that sends us on this wild goose chase for more content that we can just appreciate on levels beyond just the entertainment.
Yeah, it's just such a cycle that just feeds into itself, and it's just so great. Like,
gotta love it.
Comics are amazing.
Shout out to all comics.
Honestly, I feel like that'll be the end of like every episode of this podcast.
I know, right? Us just like geeking out about the entirety of comics.
Yeah. But I guess with that pretty much wraps up this first episode.
This first reboot, as it were, of Comics and Coffee.
Yeah. Oh, that might be the title. Might just call it episode 1, the reboot.
I love it. I'm definitely on board.
So yeah, I guess now we can plug our social media. So where can people find you on the internet, Evan?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at WebheadEv, and I'm on Instagram at Evan McGuire Art.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at APBatman with 2 T's. And then also still on Twitter at Batman Files. I have a Batman fan account that I run, and more active on that than my main account. So if you're...
Which has some awesome content, so you guys definitely should follow both of those accounts.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And then, of course, You can find us at the Media Bite. Our podcast network is on Podbean, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes now. Just search up the Media Bite podcast network on any of those. We're also on YouTube. I'm not sure if this episode will be going on YouTube, because we've been having some copyright problems with them recently, so we'll see how that goes. But we're definitely on the normal podcasting networks, so be sure to check us out there, subscribe, all that good stuff. And thank you for listening to this first the reboot episode.
The reboot. Thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Be sure to tune in next time. Later.